it's great to meet you at last. We've corresponded a couple of times, and I'm on a journey to find out a bit more about what makes Major League Rugby work, because I think there's a great deal of interest, not only in Major League Rugby, but also in League One rugby up there in Japan as well, because you guys seem to be at the cutting edge of building something really good. But before I do that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself for for the viewers and for the listeners?
Yeah, thanks, Boff. Really appreciate you reaching out and look forward to this chat immensely. So my name is Mike Rogers. I'm a professional rugby coach from New Zealand, currently living in Quincy, which is a small city within Boston, Massachusetts in the US, coaching the New England Free Jacks, which is a new team into the competition in our third season in Major League Rugby. So I know when we're kind of trying to sort the technology out before, we had a little bit of a chat, and I guess the best way of describing it is a challenge over here, because things are new, but that's really exciting and invigorating because there's an opportunity to be impactful and hopefully create something here with the Free Jacks that'll last for a long time in terms of sustained success. So really enjoying the journey so far.
And your rugby background in New Zealand?
So I've been coaching for 13 or 14 years now. Coached local club team, and then went through to Bay Plenty under-19s, Bay Plenty Mitre 10 team. Last year I coached the Waikato FPC team, who won the Farah Palmer Cup, which was pretty cool. So yeah, never played the game to any particularly high standard. Not sure whether that's a strength or a weakness. I think in some ways, honing your craft for 6, 7, 8 years as an amateur coach and transitioning into professional sets you up really nicely. But there's obviously some knowledge gaps there that you need to pick up along the way that former professional players would probably have over you to get things started. But yeah, mate, really proud of my journey, and certainly don't forget where I've come from in terms of coming from a amateur coaching background, and huge respect to those people still coaching at those levels, because that's what makes our game great.
It certainly does, and you can't do without them, and you can't do without the grassroots of the game, because that's where, in our case, that's where the All Blacks are born and nurtured. For too long now, since professional rugby, I think that part of the game has been somewhat ignored, and hopefully that's going to change in the near future. The Free Jacks, where does that name come from?
So we're obviously based in Boston, and Boston is where a lot of the war for independence kind of was staged, and it's obviously really close to Europe, so it's where the English suffered a few heavy defeats. So the Free Jacks effectively stands for free of the Union Jack, and lots of proud history around here in terms of the city and in terms of the independence stuff, but also more recently presidents that have come from Boston, and also the things that Massachusetts and New England are famous for around professional sport, medicine, education and stuff like that. It's actually been really cool to get to know what makes this place tick, because it's it's pretty unique, and mate, it's extremely cold as well, so that's definitely been a shock to the old system.
Well, it's a bit windy here in North Canterbury today, but yeah, not a bad temperature at the moment, so it's not too bad. And for a change, we've had quite a bit of rain, so the ground's green. I live on a few acres here, so yeah, it's a great place to be. I won't go into the politics of New Zealand at the moment, because I promised that I wouldn't do that on my podcast. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me as though after a couple of false starts, MLR seems to be getting its act together.
Oh, mate, it's really gaining in traction. So 13-team competition this year, 6 teams in our conference in the East and 7 in the West. A lot of talk around maybe 1 or 2 more teams entering next year. I think they want to get to 16 and 2 conferences of 8 teams, which would be fantastic. It feels really stable in terms of club ownership and stable in terms of clubs being viable. So it's still a loss leader for our owners, but in particular here at the Free Jacks, we're doing a great job of engaging with fans and building an audience. And that's the long-term game here, is to actually make a professional sports team that's viable without our owners having to reach into their back pockets every year. So, mate, it is a really cool. So different to New Zealand on a whole number of levels, and that private ownership thing is different. The travel is crazy. We've played 4 away games already this season to New Orleans, Washington DC, LA, and New York. So we've been on the road effectively for 4 weeks, which is is pretty unique. But what a great way to see the country as well. So certainly appreciate the opportunity to get around and have a look. Like, the diversity of this country is phenomenal, and I think that comes through in the way the game's played as well. Every team's quite different in terms of their game model and their identity. So, mate, it's it's challenging, but it's enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah, no. And how are the Free Jacks traveling this year?
So we're going all right. So we've played 4 games, won 3. So we managed to get wins against New Orleans, DC, and New York away, which are pretty big wins within our conference. We slipped up against the LA Giltinis, who are the championship winning team last year. Pretty phenomenal experience that going down there. The hotel that we stayed at was about 3 kilometers away from Manhattan Beach. We played at the Coliseum, which is an 80,000 seat stadium. Obviously the stadium wasn't full of fans, but pretty cool experience both for coaches and the athletes on the field. The coaches box had 10 seats in there, but there was only 2 coaches sitting in there. So it's certainly a hell of a lot different to Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I interviewed the marketing manager from the Giltinis, however you say it, on a podcast just recently, and a young guy, and he's going to be going places, and that was part of my little journey. I'm going to be speaking to a friend of mine called David Hodges, who is with the team in Austin, Texas. I think it's owned by the same guy who owns the LA team. To get an insight into how things are traveling. One of the things that I think has been noticeable in the last little while is that the United States didn't qualify for the World Cup. And I think that's been a bit of a shock to a lot of people, given that it doesn't seem as though their ability in sevens is translated into 15s. What do you put that down to?
Man, it's a really complicated beast, and I haven't got my head entirely around it yet, but there's not a great alignment between Major League Rugby and USA Rugby. So they're 2 separate entities, and there's not great alignment there. But I have a firm belief that Major League Rugby is going to be great for the game in the States, but it's going to take some time. So the work that we're doing at the grassroots level here in New England, in terms of engaging with the new audience around people playing the game, resourcing local high schools and college programs and helping them, that's going to pay off, but it's a 5 to 10 year, even longer kind of project. So turning the tide for the US national team is not going to be an easy fix. But we've got even though we have a high number of foreigners on our roster, we've got a real emphasis on developing local players, and we've contracted a couple of local guys this year that are really standing out, playing Major League Rugby week in, week out, which was probably just a pipe dream for them 12 months ago. So it'll be a real positive, but it's just going to take a bit of time, and the competition's finding its feet around, I guess, its identity in terms of wanting to have a really good product on the field. And in order to do that, you need to have really good athletes participating versus developing local players. And at the moment, the balance is probably not quite right yet. But I think it's heading in that direction. And I know they're talking around reducing the foreign player quotas and stuff over time. But in the meantime, we need to ensure that the product's good, because the product is what creates the audience. So it's a little bit of a tough one, striking that balance. But mate, I think long term, there's no doubt that Major League Rugby is going to be fantastic for the game here. And there's 350 million people or whatever it is. So we don't need that many of them to be playing the game to actually have a really awesome sport.
There's a bit of a parallel with soccer, Mike. I'm an avid soccer supporter ever since before I was born. I was a Tottenham supporter, but and played a fair bit of it in my youth as well as rugby. And it's taken a long time for soccer to take off. The soccer mums, they embraced it early on because I think that they thought it was good for their young kids. It wasn't like playing American football. This is a different kettle of fish, and it is going to take some time. But it's a matter of finding that tipping point, and and it'll come. As you say, it is going to take some time, and I think guys like yourself going up from New Zealand are going to help immensely in in bringing the Kiwi way of doing things, but at the same time embracing the differences. One of the things that I talk about quite frequently is that rugby's become McDonald's rugby. No matter where you go in the world, it all looks the same. It's like going to McDonald's. It doesn't matter where you have a McDonald's, it all tastes the same anywhere in the world. And that's the way rugby is currently being played. There's hardly any differences. New Zealand's a bit different because they try and play an attacking brand of rugby. But where is the Welsh style? The French are starting to come back, but South Africa, they've never changed from 10-man rugby. England, they don't know what style they want to play most of the time. And, and yet I hear what you say. And then I've watched a few games from up in Japan. And, I'm fairly close to Robbie Deans up there. And, and they're trying to develop their own brand, their own style of playing the game. And it was great to hear you say that in different parts of the country in America, they play their own way. And I think that's fantastic.
Oh man, it's the future is bright over here. Like, it's going to take time. I think the clubs that are doing the best are the ones in terms of continued success. They're building like pretty, at a pretty what's the word for it? Not a slow pace, but they're not in a great hurry to solve all the rugby problems in one day. So
no,
that's certainly what we're about here. Is we want to build an audience. We want to build rugby in the region. We want to, the best thing we can do is tell the story of rugby, which is really different to every other sport in America. Like, it's, for a start, it's a sport for anyone. It's a sport you can pick up in your youth or as an adult. There isn't a high cost of entry. Like, there is a little bit here around travel, but like, it's low cost of entry compared to a lot of other sports. It's a sport that you can play into your 50s or 60s if you really wanted to. Not me particularly, but there's a lot of really good stuff there, and the ethos and the values that are associated with the game are really different to a lot of other sports over here in terms of, it's, there just isn't that same, I guess, value set and looking after people when they finish playing the game, and also, it's a sport for life, as you know, and I think we just need to do a better job at telling that story, and that's the sort of reasons why people would want their kids to get involved.
And I think that's very important, because you've got to appeal to the parents as well as the kids. And it's it's a sport where you can go just about anywhere in the world and find your local rugby club and walk in there, and you're in amongst a bunch of mates immediately. Because you've got
absolutely, and there's always little connections, so you walk into a rugby club somewhere, and then that somebody knows somebody that from back home, or someone traveled there 20 years ago, and that might be one of your mates' dads or something. There's always these little connections that take place, which is, the world of rugby is actually a big one, but it's actually relatively small as well. So, mate, I love all that stuff.
Yeah, mate. But it sounds to me as though you've landed in a really good spot in your coaching career at the moment. What are your ultimate aims in coaching?
Mate, I talk about my favorite failures as a coach, and I think the vast majority of the favorite failures that I've had have been due to being in too much of a hurry.
Yes.
It was always about I want to move from club rugby to representative rugby, from rep rugby to the Mitre 10 Cup, from Mitre 10 Cup to wherever, or and it was all, you kind of have it all mapped out, and I think when you do that, you miss the point, which is it's actually about looking after people. But we're servants, really, aren't we? So I don't actually have any like huge ambitions over and above doing a really good job on the job that I'm in at the moment, and being impactful and looking after people within our organisation, and I just have a real underlying belief that whatever will happen. I know it sounds a little bit spiritual or whatever, but it's not really like that at all. It's just like, man, I just need to be in the moment and challenge myself to be the best rugby coach I can every day. Don't always get that right, but rather than going, oh, well, if we win the competition here, then there'll be an opportunity with here, and you just flip from one thing to the next. And I don't think people, you probably don't even take the time to enjoy what you're doing, which, there's probably not too many better jobs in the world than than coaching rugby. You know, it's especially as a profession. So it's pretty awesome, and I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for that.
Well, I could never be a coach, mate. I've got the wrong personality to be a coach. But I took up refereeing when I played, and that was my relaxation. It might sound strange, but for the 80 odd minutes, you couldn't think of anything else. You couldn't think about, problems at work or at home or anything like that. It was just total focus on the game, and got to run around with some great rugby players. My era, there was the Campeses of this world that I refereed, obviously in Australia. So yeah, but anybody can find their little part of the game that that they like and they excel at. And it sounds like you're on a great journey, and to be part of MLR, as it's looks to me from afar as though it's actually going to sort of be around for a while now.
Oh man, I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to be around. Like the people behind a lot of the teams are really clear in that they want this thing to be, a long-term project. It's not like a couple of other attempts I've had at getting things started over here. Like it's really well set up, and there's a lot of support around. If team owners and stuff need to change, there's a method around that to ensure that teams survive even if they do have an ownership change. And there's a lot of really good positive stuff that sits in behind. And what is a really foreign concept for me around ownership and stuff is a lot different to rugby in New Zealand, that's for sure. But man, I have no doubt that it's going to be around long term, and I have no doubt that it's going to make a huge difference in terms of the sporting landscape in the US, but it's just going to take a bit of time.
Well, I can tell you one thing that would make a big difference in America, and that is for the World Rugby to give the USA the Rugby World Cup. I think they're looking at bidding for it in the next 8 years or something like that, and I think that would make a huge difference to the profile of rugby within America. And I hope that comes off, because that's got to be very helpful.
Yeah, man, it sounds really positive on that front. There's a lot of influential people that have kind of hitched onto that concept, and I think man, it would make a huge difference to have a World Cup here, and got some fantastic facilities where games can be played, and the people would get behind it because people just love sport here. It's like part of their identity, like the American identity is professional sport in particular, but the whole thing around making international rugby more accessible to the US market just makes a lot of sense. We've seen with Japan after hosting the World Cup, they've had a massive growth in the game there in terms of participation, but also in terms of support for the professional competition up there, which has taken off over the last 2 or 3 years. So I have no doubt it's going to be a real positive.
And it's just so them. I picked out them and America to do a little bit more study on, because you hear about these things, but until you talk to people like yourself, you don't really get a flavor for what's actually happening on the ground. And from what you've said to me, it seems to me as though this is a really good thing for American rugby, but it's also a good thing for world rugby as well.
Yeah, but I totally agree. And the crazy thing is when you're here, you can actually see how hard it is, like to actually get something like this off the ground. Yeah. And we were down in New York last week, and they're where their kind of training facility and where they're kind of based in the city. There's only one venue where they could play, which was actually at a high school. So we played there. It holds about 1,000 people. And, and the week before we were playing at the Coliseum, which is an 80,000 seat stadium. And you can just see where everybody's at in terms of building the infrastructure around their clubs. And it's a massive job, like finding the right people, putting together a rugby team that's competitive with good coaches and stuff. And then you've got all the other stuff like, that we take for granted in New Zealand around having a stadium and how that functions. And man, it's a huge undertaking, but you got to take your head off to these people, like people putting money into this because they believe in the dream, and then a whole bunch of people working their backsides off to try and facilitate it. It's it's certainly like we're down at our stadium before, Veterans Memorial Stadium, which is about a 5,000 seat setup, and it's awesome. But the amount of work that goes in from our staff to actually pull off the event that we're going to have tomorrow, is phenomenal, you know, because it's a multi-use facility, so you can't have things there permanently, and it's
Yeah.
you know, she's a big undertaking, and it's certainly a bit of an eye-opener compared to New Zealand, where everyone's, you know, all my 10 teams have their own stadium, and it's pretty easy to run a game day, and there's no drama around broadcasts and all that sort of thing. Like, it's pretty seamless.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's there's a hell of a lot of challenges, that's for sure.
Mike, it's been fantastic talking to you. You know, I've been looking forward to this because I know that you're a bit of a trailblazer up there, and come from the grassroots of rugby in New Zealand to up there helping the New England Free Jacks carve their way in the rugby world. And you know, I take my hat off to you, mate, and I really hope that you know, you have a lot of success this year and in future years. Yeah, no, thank you very much for joining me. You know, I've really enjoyed the chat, even though you're recording this at the moment.
Yeah, mate, I thought I was interviewing you there for a while, but I'm glad that we've managed to sort out our role clarity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for reaching out, and I think it's awesome to be, you know, being able to talk about what's happening up here. I think it's really good for the profile of the competition and the people involved and stuff. And mate, like I said to you before, there's not too many better jobs in the world. Like, it's tough being away from family and stuff, but you know, coaching professional rugby in the US, I certainly wasn't thinking about that when I was my old impatient self.